Welcome back, learner. Myself, Dr. Vinita Singh, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, RGSC, Banaras Hindu University, with the course Rudimentary Principle and Practices of Managerial Economics. In last lecture, we have discussed the law of short run, that is law of variable proportion. In today's lecture, that is lecture number 29, module 6, we are going to study law of return to scale. In this, we are going to study the concept of law of return to scale, the various stages involved in law of return to scales, the graphical and the tabular representation of law of return to scale. Law of return to scale. As in the previous lecture, we have discussed the short run law, that is law of variable proportion. In the short run, there are two factors, the fixed and the variable factor. For increasing the output, you can do with the help of variable factor. But in the long run, all the factors are variable in nature. It means in long run there are only single factor, and that factor is known as variable factor. All the fixed factors also become the variable factor in the long run. So, for increasing the production in the long run, you can do by changing all the factors. Why all the factors? Because all the factors are variable in nature. So, simultaneously each and every factors will change for increasing the level of output. That means the proportion of each factors of production is same. Simultaneously you are increasing every units of factor. So, basically law of return to scale is a long run law where all the factors of productions are variable in nature, irrespective to short run production function where both fixed and variable factor exist. In long run, the factors are changed simultaneously for increasing the level of output, because every factors of production becomes variable in nature. Why the word simultaneously? It means all factors are together change in the same proportion for increasing the level of output in the long run. This law is known as return to scale, as entire scale of production can be changed by changing the quantities of all factors and nothing can be kept as constant. Why it is return to scale? Because the entire scale of production is changed. Entire scale of production changed means every factors of production will change for increasing the level of output. For example, suppose 2 units of labor and 2 units of capital to produce 2 units of output. That means labor and capital, both these are variable factors. Afterward, they decide to increase the scale of operation by making proportionate change in both the factor by using 4 units of labor and 4 units of capital to produce 4 units of output, which is a case of proportionate increase in output. That means for increasing the production in long run, each and every factors are changed in same equal proportion. Definition. There are 3 definitions. Every definition talks about the same, that is in long run there are only one factor that is variable factors. Production will increase only by increasing the variable factors, because nothing can be kept as constant, because there is no fixed factors at all in the long run. So we can say that when a firm or organization changes the quantity of all inputs, variable factors, in the long run it changes the scale of production for the respective goods and services. Basically, this law also has three stages. The one is increasing return to scale, the second is constant return to scale, and the third is diminishing return to scale. The first one is increasing return to scale. Why this stage is increasing? Because at this stage your output is increasing at a greater speed in comparison to the input for producing those goods and services. That means when you are increasing the variable factors, when you are increasing all the variable factors for increasing the level of output, your output increases more proportionate in comparison to the input you have applied for producing those goods and services. Because why the output is increasing more? Because of various economies presence in the organization. Because when we are doing a production at a large scale, various benefits, it is due to because of all these benefit, initially the cost of production reduces, thereby producing more goods in comparison to the input for producing those goods and services. So, for example, suppose you have increased the input by 20%, but output is increasing by 40%. That means you have used this much of input. You have used this much of input, but your output is this much. That means your output is greater than your input. And this is the increasing return to scale. That means your scale of production, your output is more than the input you are putting for producing those goods. Why? What are the reasons for increasing return to scale? Because the efficiency of firm is high. Why it is high? Because of the presence of economies of large scale. When you are doing any production on a bulk basis, on a large basis, the various economies exist, and it is due to because of these economies, the cost of producing the commodity per unit reduces, and thereby reducing the cost and increasing the return. So, it is because initially when you are using the factors, there are various benefits at the initial level, and due to this benefits only, they are producing more output, reducing the cost, and that is why increasing return to scale. You can also say increasing return to scale or diminishing cost. Second reason, division of labor. It is very possible to divide a large part into a very small part, and each part is going to be performed by a single factors, and by performing that tasks again and again, they become specialized in it, and they are using the resources to its optimum level. So, all these together make it as a increasing return, output is more in comparison to the input. Constant return to scale, or you can say constant cost. That means when your output is equal proportionate to the input you are putting for producing those goods and services. When you are putting input for producing goods and service, the input and output are exactly in same proportion, then that is known as constant return to scale. Why constant return to scale? Because your economies becomes equal to your diseconomies. Because a time will come when you are producing more and more goods, a time will come whatever was the benefit, whatever was the economies, that is going to be balanced by the diseconomies and your return will be constant. That means now economies and diseconomies are equal proportion, and due to this reason the constant return is there, or you can say constant cost of producing the goods and services. For example, you are increasing the input by 20% and you are getting the output by 20%. That means you are increasing this much of input, this much is your output. That means the proportion between the input and the output is exactly similar, proportionate to each other. Why it is? Due to because of economies and diseconomies are equal to each other. Your economies is going to be balanced by your diseconomies, and this is the reason for constant return to scale. The efficiency of firm production process reaches to its optimum level where internal and external economies of scale is exactly equal to the internal and external diseconomies of scale. Third stage, that is diminishing return to scale. As per this stage, your output is less in comparison to the input you are putting for producing those goods and services. Why your output is less? Because at this level your diseconomies is more in comparison to the economies, and it is due to because of the presence of the diseconomy the return is diminishing. The output is less in comparison to the effort you are putting in the form of input. For example, if you are increasing the input by 20%, the output is just only 10%. That means you are using this much of input, but the output is only this much. So your input is high, but your output is less. So this is the stage of diminishing return to stage. Because as you are going to produce more and more commodities, a time will come after reaching the optimum level of output, your economies is balanced by your diseconomies. If you continue with the level of production, your diseconomies will be more, and due to because of this diseconomies, your return will be in diminishing. So it is advised not to produce further once you reached in the state of constant, because you know after that if you continue with the level of production, definitely your production will fall and your production will fall and your cost of producing those commodity will high. So the reason for diminishing return to scale is the efficiency of firm production process after reaching to its optimum level reduces because internal external diseconomies of scale becomes more than the internal and external economies of scale, and your output will be less than your input. So this law can also be explained with the help of the tabular representation. As you can see the table, and it has 6 columns. The first column and the second column basically denotes that there are only 2 variable factors, that is the labor and the capital. Both are variable factors and both are increasing in a same proportion. Your variable factor labor is 0 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6, 6 to 7. One by one you are increasing the variable unit, that is labor, and you are increasing the capital from 0 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14. That means simultaneously you are increasing both the factors in an equal proportionate manner for increasing the level of output. So, this can also be represented in the form of percentage. That means how much percentage you are increasing labor and capital, and what will be the impact on the total output. So, your total product is also increasing from 0 to 40, 40 to 90, 90 to 120, then 120, then 100 and then 80. That means your total product is increasing at an increasing rate, then at a diminishing rate, reaching to its maximum, stay constant and start falling, because a time will come when the optimum combination has been achieved, and after that it will definitely going to fall. So, you have to see the relationship between the input and the output. We are going to refer this to column. That means when there was zero level of output, when there was zero level of input, that means there is no labor, no capital, so nothing can be produced, because it is the factors which will produce the goods and services. And that is why when the labor is 0, when the labor is 0, when the capital is 0, your total output is also 0. That is why your total product will start from the point of origin, signifies that no output at no level of input. That means there is no input, that means there is no output. As already been told, there is a direct proportional relationship between the input and the output. If you will have input, then you will have output. If you don't have an input, you will not have any output. So, first you are having 100 input, that means 100% labor and capital, giving you 200% of output. 50% of labor and capital, giving you 100% of output. That means your input is less than your output. That means your output is more, your input is less, and this is the stage of increasing return to scale. That means your output is greater than your input. And why? Because of various economies. Due to this, the cost of production reduces at the initial level, and this increases the level of output. Again, this 2 is the constant return to scale. That means you are having 30% of labor and capital, that is giving you only 30% of output. Again 25% of labor and capital, that is giving you 25% of output. That means your input and output exactly vary in the same proportionate. That means your output is equal to your input. That means constant return to scale and constant cost of producing the commodities. Why? Because your economies is equal to your diseconomies. Then the last, at the 6th and the 7th labor, and at the 12th and 14th capital, you are increasing the labor and capital by 20%. It is giving you a total output by 10%. And again it is a 10% increase in labor and capital, it is just giving you a 5%. That means you are increasing more inputs, but the output is less. That means your output is less than your input, and this is the stage of diminishing return to state. Why it exists? Because now your diseconomies is more than your economies. And why it arises? Because once you have reached the optimum level, if you continue with the level of production, definitely it will give you a less return in comparison to the effort or input you put for producing those goods and services. So, this is the explanation of the table which I have discussed with you people. You can go through it. Now, the graphical representation of the law of return to scale. The first is increasing return to scale. What I told you people, increasing means your output is more, your input is less. As you can see on the x axis it is unit of labor and capital, on the y axis it is output. Initially you are producing OP, initially you are producing this much of output at this much of unit of labor and capital. Now you are increasing the units of labor from 0Q to 0Q1, that means this level, but your output is increasing by this much. That means this graph, this IR denotes the increasing return. That means your output is greater than your input, and it starts from the point of origin, which signifies that when there is no units of labor and capital, the output is 0. As you are increasing the labor and capital, the output is increasing. Then constant return to scale. Again, constant return to scale, as I already told you people, your output is equal to your input. That means simultaneously same proportionate change between the input and the output. Again, on the x axis you are showing the units of labor and the capital, that is the independent variable. On the y axis you are showing the output, that is the dependent variable. You are increasing the initially you are producing 0P output at 0Q level of input. Now you are increasing the input from 0Q to 0Q1, and you are increasing the output from 0P to 0P1. That means the change in input and the change in output exactly same. So, this will be a line like this straight line that dignify the constant return to scale, and it will start from the point of origin. That signifies that when there is no level of input, there will be no output. The third is the diminishing return to scale. This means your output is less than your input. Why? Because of diseconomies. Now your diseconomies is more than your economies, and due to this reason there is diminishing return to scale. Again, on the x axis you are showing the units of labor and the capital, that is the independent variable. On the y axis you are showing the output, that is the dependent variable. Initially you are producing OP output at OQ of units of labor and capital. Now you want to increase the output, you are increasing your input by this level, but your output is increasing only this level. So, if you are going to join this, then it will give you a diminishing return to scale. That signifies that your output is less than your input, and it will start from the point of origin. That signifies when there is no input, there will be no output. So, this is all about for today's lecture. In today's lecture, we have discussed in detail the long run law, that is return to a scale, where there are only one factor, that is a variable factors, and if you need to increase the level of production, you can do by changing all the variable factors. It has 3 stages: increasing, constant and diminishing. Why these 3 stages? Because because of existence of various economies, that will be followed by equal to economies and diseconomies. A time will come will be more diseconomies, because the proportion between the factors do get changed, and due to this there is differences in the return in comparison to the cost. So thank you so much for today's sessions. We'll be meeting again for the next session, in which we are going to discuss about the economies and the diseconomies of the scale, because it is because of this economies and diseconomies we have various returns which we have discussed today. So in next session we will be discussing these economies and diseconomies in detail. So thank you so much for today's sessions.